On a crisp autumn morning in 2025, Dr. Vivian Chen adjusted the glow of her desk lamp deep in the basement archives of the Massachusetts Historical Society. Recently appointed curator of the Society's extensive photography collection, she had been assigned the enormous task of digitizing and cataloging thousands of portraits once belonging to the now defunct Blackwell Studio. Once celebrated as Boston's most prestigious photography establishment, the studio's images mostly adhered to familiar conventions. Families posed stiffly in groups. Individuals arranged in rigid formality and carefully staged commemorations of weddings or graduations. The technical execution of these photographs varied. Yet the expressions were consistently restrained, a reflection of the long exposure times demanded by early cameras. But then, amid the neatly ordered progression of images, Dr. Chen discovered something that disrupted the monotony. The photograph, dated June 18, 1902, depicted a girl of perhaps 12 years, seated on an ornate chair before a painted backdrop of classical columns. What immediately stood out was her expression. Unlike her contemporaries, the child bore a faint smile, not the broad, candid type modern cameras could easily capture, but a delicate upward curve of the lips that lent an unusual warmth to her otherwise formal posture. The clarity of the print was striking, and on its reverse side was an inscription: Charlotte Winters, daughter of Dr. and Mrs. Edmund Winters, Beacon Hill. At first, Chen prepared to file the photograph with the others, but something in Charlotte's expression arrested her attention. Switching on her digital magnifier, she leaned closer, scrutinizing the girl's face. The smile seemed genuine enough, yet her eyes betrayed a contradiction. There was an unsettling intensity, a quiet dissonance between her pleasant mouth and her gaze, as though she were attempting to communicate something unspoken. Adam Chen called to her assistant, "Come take a look at this." He studied the magnified image and his brow furrowed. "They don't match," he observed. "Her eyes don't look happy at all. They look afraid. Or maybe like she's warning someone." "Exactly," Chen murmured. "And look at this. See the pupils?" Within the reflections of Charlotte's dilated eyes, faint yet unmistakable, appeared the outline of a figure. A shadowy silhouette lingered beside the photographer, invisible in the frame, yet captured in the watchful gaze of the girl. What began as a routine archival duty swiftly transformed into a mystery. With mounting curiosity, Dr. Chen and Adam initiated a systematic investigation into the life of Charlotte Winters and her family, consulting the Society's own records, then extending their search to Boston City archives and faded newspaper clippings, determined to uncover the truth behind the haunting image. The Winters family, Adam explained while reviewing his research notes, occupied a notable place in Boston society. Dr. Edmund Winters, the patriarch, was a respected ophthalmologist whose practice on Commonwealth Avenue served the city's elite. His wife, Evelyn, was deeply engaged in civic life, an active member of the Ladies' Benevolent Society and several cultural committees that placed her firmly in the orbit of Boston's philanthropic class. Their two children, Charlotte, born in 1890, and her younger brother, Frederick, born 3 years later, were raised in the refined environment of Beacon Hill. Their presence confirmed by listings in city directories that situated the family among the prosperous upper middle class. Edmund Winters' career revealed both prestige and innovation. A graduate of Harvard Medical School in 1884, he had built a reputation for pioneering surgical approaches to cataract removal and other eye disorders, a specialization that kept him at the forefront of his field. Dr. Chen, leafing through a 1900 issue of a medical journal, noted an intriguing detail. Winters had published several articles advocating for the use of photographic documentation in ophthalmology. He was experimenting with cameras, not only as instruments of record, but as diagnostic tools, a progressive idea in an age when medicine and technology were just beginning to overlap in meaningful ways. The social columns of the Boston Globe painted a portrait of the family's outward life, noting their attendance at opera performances, glittering charity galas, and leisurely retreats to a summer cottage in Nantucket. Everything suggested the Winters household exemplified Edwardian respectability and success. Charlotte's own record was equally promising. Adam had located her enrollment at the Winthrop School for Girls, where she distinguished herself in mathematics and languages. The 1902 portrait taken when she was 12 appeared to mark the conclusion of her primary education, a conventional milestone before the transition to secondary studies. And yet, after that summer, Charlotte's presence in the historical record all but evaporated. The family continued to appear in society notices and public documents, but Charlotte's name grew conspicuously scarce. Only a brief social item from September 1902 offered a clue. Miss Charlotte Winters has been sent to Switzerland for her health and education, accompanied by her maternal aunt, Mrs. Harriet Pembroke. The phrasing gave Dr. Chen pause. In that era, being sent abroad for health was often a genteel euphemism, masking anything from tuberculosis to emotional distress, sometimes even scandal. Why, she wondered aloud, had Charlotte been removed so abruptly from the public eye, mere weeks after her portrait was taken? The disquieting reflection in her pupils, an unacknowledged figure frozen in the instant of exposure, only deepened the sense of mystery. Hoping to contextualize the circumstances of that photograph, Dr. Chen and Adam turned to the surviving business records of the Blackwell studio preserved alongside its image collection. They sifted through leather-bound appointment books, client correspondence, and technical notes that documented the studio's activities during the spring and summer of 1902. Then Adam spotted the crucial entry June 18, 1902. Charlotte Winters, 10:30 a.m. Commissioned by Dr. Edmund Winters. Special lighting setup requested. Unlike most routine appointments that listed nothing more than names and times, this notation contained a level of detail that stood out, a hint that something unusual had been planned for Charlotte's sitting that day. The notation about special lighting immediately raised questions, but the real breakthrough came from a slim, leather-bound notebook kept by Thomas Blackwell himself, the studio's founder and master photographer. Blackwell, widely admired for his technical ingenuity, had a habit of recording the finer details of complex commissions and experimental setups. His entry for June 18, 1902, offered a candid glimpse into the day of Charlotte's portrait. Session with Charlotte Winters, daughter of Dr. Edmund. Edmund Winters, the page began. Father specified lighting configuration based on his own photographic research. Requested unusual mirror placement to achieve reflective properties in subject's eyes. Explained it related to his medical documentation techniques. Girl appeared uneasy with arrangement, but followed father's instructions. 6 exposures produced with mirror adjustments between each. Dr. Winters inspected each negative immediately, in darkroom selecting one only for printing. Unusual session. Not my place to question clients' requirements, particularly of Dr. Winters' status. The explanation struck Dr. Chen with clarity. The eerie reflection they had seen in Charlotte's eyes was no accident. It was the direct result of mirrors deliberately positioned as part of Dr. Winters' own design. Yet the larger question loomed: why would an ophthalmologist orchestrate such an elaborate setup for his daughter's portrait? Adam echoed the thought aloud, unsettled by the implication. As they pressed further into Blackwell's records, the peculiarities deepened. Additional notes revealed that Dr. Winters had personally visited the studio on 2 separate occasions prior to the session, each time to fine-tune the technical specifications of the mirror and lighting arrangement. He returned once more after the sitting, insisting on taking possession of all the negatives himself, an uncommon demand since studios routinely kept their plates for future print orders. Each detail underscored the same point. Dr. Winters had exerted meticulous control over every aspect of the portrait, transforming what should have been a routine commemorative photograph into a carefully engineered experiment, its true purpose obscured by layers of formality and silence. Adam's suggestion hung heavy in the archive room of Dr. Winters' unusual portrait session was tied to his medical work, then understanding his research might unlock the mystery of Charlotte's sudden disappearance from Boston society. Acting on this lead, Dr. Chen submitted a formal request to Harvard Medical School's archives, where the professional papers of its notable alumni were preserved. The Winters collection proved extensive, containing published studies, lecture drafts, and decades of correspondence with colleagues. As Chen and Adam sifted through the material, a complex portrait of Dr. Winters emerged. Though his practice centered on ophthalmology, his intellectual pursuits extended into the still nascent field of psychiatry, particularly its intersections with vision and perception. Between 1899 and 1902, he had published a series of articles in the New England Journal of Medicine that explored his theory abnormalities of the eye's subtle shifts in pupil dilation. Iris patterning or scleral tint could serve as early diagnostic indicators of certain mental conditions. His papers described photographic methods he had developed to record such changes with precision, asserting that images could reveal what the human eye might overlook. The most chilling discovery came not from published work, but from private correspondence. A confidential letter dated April 1902, addressed to a colleague at Milan Hospital, described observations within his own household. I have observed in my own household the early manifestations I previously documented only in clinical settings, Winters wrote. The pupillary responses and scleral discolorations are unmistakable, though intermittent. I have begun documenting the progression photographically while considering appropriate interventions. The familial connection cannot be ignored and raises profound questions about hereditary factors. Adam read the words aloud and looked up, shaken. He was observing someone in his family. Given the timing, Chen whispered it had to be Charlotte. Their fears were soon corroborated by an unpublished draft paper discovered among Winters' notes ominously titled Photographic Documentation of Early Onset Perceptual Aberrations, a Case Study. Though the subject's name was withheld, the details left little doubt. The patient was described as a female aged 12, from a family of social prominence and academic distinction with maternal ancestry that included at least 2 relatives institutionalized for similar afflictions. The draft outlined a progressive disorder marked by visual hallucinations beginning in adolescence, with early ocular changes preceding behavioral symptoms. Winters' aim was clear. Through carefully staged photography, he sought to create a new diagnostic tool that could capture the hidden signs of the condition before they manifested outwardly. The meaning of Charlotte's portrait crystallized. It had never been intended as a simple keepsake, but as clinical documentation, a controlled experiment engineered to record signs of an inherited disorder. The mirrors, the lighting, the father's insistence on controlling every exposure, each detail, was part of a medical procedure disguised as art. And then, only weeks later, Charlotte was abruptly dispatched to Switzerland. The timing suggested Winters had confirmed his worst suspicions. Adam exhaled slowly. The portrait wasn't just proof of her education milestone, he murmured. It was proof of her illness. Dr. Chen's research soon pointed her toward the next leads, the archives of the Bellevue Sanitarium in Kreuzlingen, Switzerland, a facility known at the time for housing children and adolescents from Europe's upper classes, often under the guise of extended convalescence. If Charlotte had been sent there, the answers they sought might still rest in its surviving records. Founded in 1857, the Bellevue Sanitarium in Kreuzlingen had earned a reputation as a progressive private clinic, its secluded grounds serving as a haven for wealthy international families who sought discreet treatment for nervous and psychological disorders. The institution's meticulous records, preserved with care for historical research, were guarded by layers of privacy protections, but after weeks of formal correspondence and credential review, Dr. Chen succeeded in obtaining a redacted extract of admissions between 1902 and 1905. Within those files lay the confirmation they had anticipated an entry marked simply CW. Female, age 12. American nationality admitted, August 15, 1902, barely 2 months after Charlotte's portrait was taken. The admitting physician's notes painted a vivid and unsettling picture. The patient had arrived accompanied by her father, also a physician, and her maternal aunt who intended to remain nearby throughout the course of treatment. The father provided unusually extensive documentation, including photographs of the girl's pupils that he claimed corresponded to her reported visual disturbances. Charlotte herself presented as intelligent, polite, and articulate, but confessed to persistent hallucinations of a figure who appeared at the edges of her vision. She described episodes of terror whenever she became convinced the figure was standing close to her. The clinical examinations revealed no organic cause, and so her care followed the protocols of the era rest cures: hydrotherapy, nutritional oversight, and regular talk sessions rooted in the emerging frameworks of modern psychology. While her attending physicians regarded Dr. Winters's photographic theories with skepticism, they reluctantly accommodated his demands that her eyes be documented during each of his quarterly visits. The most striking artifact in the file was a transcript from an interview conducted in December 1902 by the clinic's director, preserved word for word. "When did you first notice the figure?" the doctor asked. "Last Christmas," Charlotte answered softly. "At first only when I was alone in my room, then more often." "Can you describe what you see?" "A man in dark clothes. He stands very still, always watching." "Does he speak to you?" "No, but he wants something. I can feel it." "When was the last time you saw him?" "During the photograph. Father had mirrors everywhere. The man was standing beside Mr. Blackwell. I saw him in the mirrors too many times. That's when Father knew I wasn't making it up." 3 years of records followed, charting the slow trajectory of her treatment. Though her physicians noted that Charlotte remained vulnerable to episodes of fear by late 1905, they reported encouraging progress. The final note, dated October of that year, read, "Patient shows significant improvement. Visual phenomena greatly reduced in frequency. Patient has developed coping strategies when episodes occur. Recommendation released to family care with continued observation." Dr. Chen, shaken but compelled, turned next to the question that lingered: what was happening inside the Winters family itself. During those years, she began broadening her research to encompass private correspondence diaries and social records that might shed light on the pressures, secrets, and silences that had shaped their story. Among the Massachusetts Historical Society's holdings were several family archives donated by Boston's old elite, including the Pembrokes, Charlotte Winters's maternal relatives. Harriet Pembroke, the aunt who had accompanied Charlotte to Switzerland, had kept an extensive correspondence with her sister Evelyn Winters during their long separation. Preserved by descendants and later donated, these letters offered a rare, intimate view into the family's private turmoil at the very moment Charlotte's life changed course. One letter, dated July 10, 1902, just weeks after Charlotte's portrait, but before her departure, revealed the household in crisis. "My dearest Evelyn," Harriet wrote, I arrived in Boston as quickly as arrangements permitted after Edmund's urgent telegram. Having now spent 3 days observing dear Charlotte, I understand your distress. The child demonstrates remarkable composure, yet the episodes of terror when she believes she sees the figure are most disturbing. Edmund's certainty that the photographic evidence confirms what he calls the Pembroke affliction has clearly devastated you. But we must face this with scientific rationality, as he insists, rather than with the fear and shame that consumed our mother when Aunt Margaret suffered her own trials. From then on, the correspondence traced the practical and emotional negotiations that led to Charlotte's treatment abroad. The official explanation was health and education. But beneath that veil lay two motives: Dr. Winter's confidence in Bellevue's progressive methods and the family's desire to shield Charlotte from the whisper of scandal that would surely spread in Boston society. One letter, written in November 1902 after Charlotte had spent several months at Bellevue, carried an especially haunting tone. Edmund continues his photographic documentation with an almost obsessive determination. He believes progress can be seen in minute changes of Charlotte's iris, though the Bellevue physicians do not share his conviction. What troubles me most is his refusal to acknowledge any cause beyond heredity. When Charlotte spoke again of the figure, she said he resembled the man who so often visited your home during Edmund's evening consultations last winter. He dismissed it at once. He will not consider the possibility that what she sees has any basis in reality. I fear his insistence on a purely medical explanation arises less from scientific rigor than from terror at what the alternative might imply. This passing mention of a mysterious visitor reframed the entire enigma. It suggested that the reflection in Charlotte's eyes may not have been an incidental artifact of mirrors and light, but perhaps an actual person, one whom Charlotte associated with her haunting visions. Was Dr. Winters documenting pathology, or had his daughter's portrait accidentally preserved a more tangible presence? To grasp why the Winters family acted as they did, Dr. Chen sought broader context. She consulted Dr. Margaret Harper, a medical historian specializing in social attitudes toward psychiatry in turn-of-the-century Boston. Harper explained that in this era, even prominent families dreaded the stain of madness, which could derail marriages, reputations, and careers. Scientific discourse about heredity and degeneration was widely circulated, making families like the Pembrokes fearful that any hint of instability would mark their entire lineage. Sending Charlotte abroad was as much a social strategy as a medical decision, out of sight, carefully explained, yet closely monitored through Dr. Winters's obsessive lens. The letters, combined with Harper's insights, sharpened the mystery rather than dissolving it. Who was the visitor Charlotte claimed to see in her home later, mirrored in her portrait? And why was Dr. Winters so determined to erase every explanation except the one he could control through science? The turn of the 20th century marked a pivotal moment in the history of psychiatry. Dr. Harper explained during her meeting with Dr. Chen in her book-lined Harvard office. Where earlier generations often framed mental illness in terms of morality, sin, or even supernatural influence, the new century ushered in a scientific focus on heredity, neurology, and physiology. Yet this shift in theory did little to ease the crushing weight of stigma. For Boston's elite families, especially those like the Winters who prided themselves on professional distinction and social pedigree, the mere suggestion of nervous fragility could imperil reputations, marriages, and careers. For Edmund Winters, a physician of prominence, having a daughter suspected of inheritable instability posed both a personal and professional crisis. Exile to Switzerland offered an elegant solution. On the surface, Charlotte's absence could be explained by health and educational opportunity. In practice, such moves allowed families to combine access to legitimate treatments with the protective shield of distance. Bellevue Sanitarium was exactly the sort of institution favored for its discretion and its progressive reputation, where the inconvenient presence of illness could be managed far from society's gaze. What intrigued Harper most was Winters's obsessive reliance on photography. Around 1900, psychiatry and neurology were fascinated by what was called the physiognomy of mental illness, the idea that visual signs in the face posture or gaze could reveal hidden disorders. Clinics across Europe and America compiled vast photographic catalogs, convinced that expressions or physical traits could be diagnostic markers. Winters's decision to center his daughter's eyes in his photographic experiments fit neatly within this climate of thought. His ophthalmological background gave him both the tools and the conviction to pursue the eye as a site where mental disturbance might first betray itself. Charlotte's case notes from Bellevue Harper observed bore all the hallmarks of what contemporaries might have diagnosed as hallucinatory hysteria or incipient dementia praecox, what modern psychiatry would place along the schizophrenia spectrum. Her accounts of a shadowed man standing silently near her, captured even in the moment of her portrait, aligned eerily with such diagnoses. Yet Harper was quick to add that modern perspectives would not exclude other possibilities. Trauma abuse or actual encounters could easily be dismissed as delusion within the rigid frameworks of early 20th century medicine. The Pembroke letters added another layer. Their references to the Pembroke affliction hinted at a troubling family history. Genealogical records confirmed that Charlotte's maternal grandmother had two sisters confined to institutions for nervous disorders marked by perceptual disturbances remarkably similar to Charlotte's. In that sense, Winters may have been correct about a hereditary predisposition. But his exclusive focus on biology and heredity betrayed both his era's medical orthodoxy and his own professional biases. By refusing to consider that Charlotte's visions might reflect lived reality, especially given Harriet's hint of a mysterious visitor in the Winters home, he may have overlooked the most crucial element of all, the possibility that his daughter's eyes had indeed captured more than a symptom. Charlotte Winters' story did not end with her years of convalescence abroad. Dr. Chen traced her return to Boston in late 1905, piecing together her reintegration through scattered social notices, school registers, and the surviving Pembroke correspondence. Rather than immediately rejoining her parents on Beacon Hill, Charlotte lived under the care of her Aunt Harriet in Brooklyn, where she attended a modest private academy to finish her secondary schooling. This arrangement, presented publicly as a matter of convenience, likely served as a carefully managed transition, allowing Charlotte to reacclimate under the steady guidance of her aunt. By all accounts, her academic excellence endured with special recognition for her aptitude in both science and the arts. By 1907, Charlotte cautiously re-entered Boston society. She appeared at select gatherings deemed appropriate for a young woman of her station, though always with a relative at her side. Meanwhile, her father's scientific ambitions reached a culmination. In 1908, Dr. Edmund Winters finally published his long-anticipated paper in a European medical journal outlining his method of photographic diagnosis for perceptual disorders. While he shielded his daughter's identity, the paper included a series of highly detailed photographs of eyes exhibiting what Winters described as diagnostic irregularities. Experts consulted by Dr. Chen later confirmed these images bore every sign of being Charlotte's, taken across different stages of his documentation. Notably absent, however, was any reference to the figure Charlotte had so vividly described. Winters confined his analysis strictly to physiological anomalies, presenting his work as an innovative medical tool while erasing the lived realities behind the symptoms. In Boston, Charlotte herself upheld the public facade. A brief Society page interview following her return mentioned only her polished education abroad and a cultivated interest in European artistic trends. No hint of illness or treatment appeared. Yet behind the polished surface, Charlotte confided her unvarnished truth in the private journal she kept during this period, later discovered among Harriet Pembroke's preserved papers. An entry from December 1905 revealed her guarded perspective. Father continues to examine my eyes weekly, photographing them in his study with the same mirrors and lights as before. He tells me he is satisfied with my improvements, but he never asks if I still see the visitor. I have not told him. The figure appears less often, but I recognized him at the Hendersons' dinner last week. He stood in the doorway watching, as he used to in our home. Father did not notice preoccupied with Dr. Henderson. Aunt Harriet squeezed my hand when I caught my breath. Later, she told me that perhaps what I see is real, but best left unspoken with Father. She understands what he cannot, that sometimes what appears in one's eyes is not delusion, but reflection. This revelation jolted Dr. Chen. The figure in Charlotte's vision, long dismissed as hereditary hallucination, may have corresponded to someone tangible. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Adam, digging through period newspapers, uncovered a striking lead. I found him. He announced placing a brittle clipping from the Boston Police Gazette dated October 1906 on Chen's desk. The report detailed the arrest of one Richard Caldwell, a former assistant to several prominent physicians accused of stealing medical supplies and confidential patient records. The connection between Charlotte's spectral figure and this real individual within the Winters professional circle hinted that the unsettling reflection in her eyes might have captured more than her father ever allowed himself to believe. The Boston Police Gazette article provided a revelation that reshaped everything Dr. Chen and Adam thought they knew about Charlotte's ordeal. Richard Caldwell, the man arrested in 1906, had once been directly connected to the Winters household. From 1900 to 1902, he worked as Edmund Winters' assistant, handling clerical matters and occasionally operating photographic equipment during medical examinations. His dismissal, recorded vaguely, as for cause, preceded a series of short-term employments with other physicians before his final fall from grace. The Gazette reported damning details. When police searched Caldwell's lodgings, they uncovered not only stolen medical supplies, but also a disturbing cache of unauthorized photographs. Many depicted young female patients taken without consent, suggesting a pattern of voyeuristic surveillance that had extended beyond his professional duties. Authorities even suspected that Caldwell had exploited his access during house calls to intrude into private homes. Adam's voice dropped as he read the final lines aloud. Most significant among the discoveries is a photograph of the accused Richard Caldwell taken after his arrest. The grainy portrait showed a slender man clothed in dark attire, his angular silhouette eerily similar to the faint reflection captured in Charlotte's eyes during her 1902 sitting. Suddenly, Charlotte's haunting accounts, long dismissed as hallucinations, emerged as credible testimony. The figure she described, standing in corners watching silently, could well have been Caldwell himself, lingering during evenings when Dr. Winters' consultations gave him plausible access to the family's Beacon Hill home. Court records confirmed that Caldwell was sentenced to 3 years in prison for his crimes. The timing was telling. His arrest in September 1906 occurred just weeks before Charlotte reappeared more visibly in Boston society. With Caldwell neutralized, the silent presence that had shadowed her adolescence finally vanished. The last piece of evidence came not from public archives, but from Harriet Pembroke's private correspondence. In a letter to her sister Evelyn, dated October 1906, Harriet acknowledged the dual truths now surrounding Charlotte's case. After Caldwell's arrest, Edmund still refuses to accept that Charlotte's visions had any foundation in reality. Even confronted with the evidence of Caldwell's possession of disturbing materials, he clings to his theories. His professional reputation is too deeply entwined with his diagnostic work to concede error. Perhaps it is better this way. Charlotte has found her own peace by understanding what was truly happening. While Edmund maintains his medical narrative, she displays resilience and a wisdom beyond her years, moving forward with clarity where he cannot. The episode forces me to wonder how many so-called nervous conditions in women arise not from imagination, but from circumstances society refuses to see because they disrupt its comfortable certainties. For Dr. Chen, the threads converged with startling coherence. Charlotte Winters had been both a patient and a witness, caught between her father's scientific lens and the predations of a man hidden in plain sight. The photograph that began as a curiosity in the archives had proved to be both medical documentation and, inadvertently, forensic evidence of a truth suppressed for over a century. The letter from Harriet Pembroke revealed a vital truth. While Dr. Winters clung to his medical interpretation of hereditary illness, it was Charlotte's aunt who offered her the recognition and validation she needed. Harriet's willingness to acknowledge that her niece might indeed have seen someone real, someone whose presence was both intrusive and threatening, gave Charlotte the grounding to reconcile her experiences. This quiet support likely played a decisive role in her recovery and her eventual reintegration into society. Dr. Chen reflected on this insight with measured conviction. The 1902 portrait, she realized, had preserved far more than Edmund Winters ever intended. While he believed he was documenting evidence of a genetic condition, the image also contained Charlotte's silent testimony, a person unauthorized and dangerous, watching her from the shadows. What he dismissed as pathology was in fact evidence. 6 months after her discovery, Dr. Chen unveiled a landmark exhibition at the Massachusetts Historical Society titled Beyond the Frame: Hidden Narratives in Early Photography. At its heart stood Charlotte's portrait, displayed with sensitivity and scholarly rigor, contextualized by historical research and ethical care for the family's story. The exhibition used Charlotte's case to illuminate broader themes: the medical history of psychiatric photography, the heavy weight of social stigma surrounding mental health, the gendered biases that shape diagnosis, and the photographic innovations that captured faint but revealing details, like the reflection in a child's eyes. Dr. Chen addressed the audience at the opening reception, her words resonating through the gallery. What makes this portrait extraordinary is its dual function. Dr. Winters engineered the setup to confirm what he believed were hereditary signs of mental illness. Charlotte, knowing what her father sought nonetheless, used the same image to communicate something he could not accept: that the figure she feared was real. The camera captured both narratives at once, and in doing so preserved a hidden truth. Visitors were invited to a digital enhancement station where they could examine the reflection for themselves. The faint outline in Charlotte's pupils that had once been dismissed as hallucination, but ultimately exposed Richard Caldwell's intrusion into the Winters household. For many, the experience was unsettling, yet profoundly moving. Chen also ensured that Charlotte's life was remembered beyond the shadows of 1902 and 1906. Research revealed that Charlotte later enrolled at Radcliffe College, where she pursued studies in both art and science. In her adulthood, she married a professor of psychology, and together they published papers exploring how perceptual experiences were shaped by culture, medicine, and interpretation. Their work subtly but powerfully challenged prevailing notions about women's mental health, particularly the tendency to dismiss female testimony as hysteria. Perhaps most poignantly, Charlotte used her resilience to give others a chance she nearly lost herself. In the 1930s, she founded a small but impactful organization dedicated to supporting young women who had endured illness or stigma, providing them with educational opportunities and financial assistance. Through this foundation, she transformed her own survival into a legacy of empowerment, ensuring that others could build new futures, unburdened by the limitations once imposed on her. In the end, Charlotte Winters's portrait was no longer just a relic of Edwardian photography. It was a layered document of truth and perception, a testimony to resilience, and a reminder of how history often hides as much as it reveals, until someone dares to look closely enough. Charlotte Winters's story, Dr. Chen emphasized in her concluding exhibition notes, embodied the hidden potential of historical photographs to reveal truths far beyond their intended purpose. In the subtle details, a reflected figure caught in the surface of a young girl's eyes, a smile that sits uneasily against her gaze. We uncover evidence of lived experiences that official records either omit or misinterpret. When examined through both technical precision and historical context, such images restore perspectives that might otherwise remain unseen, particularly those of individuals whose voices were minimized or silenced by the medical and social structures of their era. The exhibition drew wide attention, resonating across audiences both scholarly and public. Academics praised its careful integration of archival evidence and visual analysis, while medical historians noted its importance in reconsidering early psychiatric practices. Mental health advocates, too, found in Charlotte's portrait a compelling symbol of the need for more nuanced approaches, attentive not only to biology, but also to personal testimony and environment. For visitors, the portrait transcended its origins as a formal commission. In its layered meanings, part clinical experiment, part silent plea, part accidental forensic record, it became a reminder of how photography could preserve parallel truths. For Dr. Winters, it had been evidence of hereditary illness. For Charlotte, it was a quiet act of resistance, a way of asserting her reality when words had failed her. By the time the exhibition closed, Charlotte's image had transformed into something larger than a family relic. It stood as a symbol of resilience and agency, a testament to how even those constrained by stigma, silence, or misinterpretation could leave behind their own narrative, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to finally see.